I held her, and she just cried and cried and cried. And here we were. All we'd done is speak the truth in the most compassionate and truthful way we knew how to do. We hadn't done anything wrong. All we did was tell the other side of the story, and of course the men in grey suits came down on my wife with a hatchet. This business about her bullying, have you ever known Megan to be anything but genuine, kind, sincere and loving? She saved me from the demons of the royal family. She's my saviour. Jesus Christ himself could never have been as wonderful as she was to me.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Revenge Review. And we are roaring up to the Oprah Winfrey interview. And actually, we touch on it today. He kind of talks about it a little bit, like the idea that it happened and, how they sort of orchestrated getting into those seats with Netflix, with Spotify. And it's an ironic time to be covering the height of their time in America when we are also currently, like in real time, seeing the nosedive of the Sussex brand. So it's very interesting. I don't see them ever being able to reach the height that they were once at unless they decided to take a dramatic 180 and come out and actually be vulnerable and actually speak to people and actually there'll who they are as human beings. But I don't think they even know who they are as human beings. They have tried, their whole lives have been putting on a mask for this group, for that group, pretending this, saying that. I don't know if they know who they are at the core of it. I remember my mom telling me when I was a kid, you can lie so much that you no longer can tell the truth. And cautioning me against creating a life for myself where I had disillusioned myself and those around me to such an extent that I couldn't find my way to the light. And Jesus said that the person who is the most blinded is the one who sees the darkness and calls it light. And I wonder sometimes where Meghan and Harry are, how they are ever going to be able to find their way out of what they've created, because I don't know that they could identify the truth in any scenario. And I don't even know if they could even identify the truth in each other. What kind of relationship do they have behind closed doors? Because I just don't imagine that either one of them has ever put their guard down. I know that I saw somebody the other day saying that they never thought that, they don't think that Harry and Meghan are ever going to divorce because they're they're so close, they're besties. And I'm like, what gives you that idea? Just because Meghan is constantly clinging to Harry? They tell us that they are madly in love with each other just because they got married, in the blink of an eye. I don't trust anything Meghan does. Least of all her relationship with Harry. That's the most fraudulent union I think I've ever come upon. I think there was a time when Harry was head over heels for Meghan. I've never believed that Meghan was ever head over heels for Harry. Never. This is the long con, if ever there was one. And I feel like Harry, if he ever was head over heels for her, in Spare, he writes he'd never seen a more beautiful woman. But beauty fades real quick when you're holed up in a house with a horror show. It's real hard to see how pretty she was at first. So I just wonder how well they get along behind closed doors. And if the rumors are to be believed, Harry isn't even really at the house that much. He spends a lot of time in hotels. Seems like he could have just, gone to one of the 9 bedrooms or stayed out on the guest cottage. But don't you know that if Meghan is mad at you, she's probably if you go close yourself up in a room, she's over there, she's going to knock the door down and make you talk to her about whatever it is. So probably he does have to retreat from that palatial mansion in the 22 acres they have, or whatever the lot size is. There's probably not 1 square inch of that place he could hide in that she wouldn't suss him out. Anyway, let's just get into our chapter today because it is interesting and just details. We start out with a very interesting little tidbit. I had never heard this story. And if I'm 100% honest with you, I'm not even familiar with all of the key players. But there's some interesting details just in this first story that it's you people will just sidle up to anybody who might slip a few dollars into your palm. You know, you don't have any morals. You don't have any code by which you live. Your code is the almighty dollar. All right, so Tom Bowers sets the scene for this chapter 37 called Netflix by telling us about Harry and Meghan going out to Tom Barrack's 1,200-acre mountain ranch near Santa Barbara to meet this controversial father of six and have a little movie night. Tom Barrack is an enormous Trump-supporting billionaire. I only include that fact because Harry and Meghan have been so profoundly anti-Trump, and they make it seem like it's some kind of moral crime to associate any of your dealings with anybody who would have anything to do with him, that it's contrary to their own political ethos to associate with this person who is a known Trump supporter, who controlled a multi-billion-dollar property empire linked to Arab investors. That has problems for Meghan because she has said in the past that she's got problems with the Middle Eastern nations who are homophobic and anti-pride and all this. She's got real problems with those people. She's got real problems with Trump. But she's going to cozy up to Tom Barrack because he's a millionaire. And Oprah is actually the one who was in charge of introductions here. So even Oprah really she doesn't really care. It's just, how do we grease the deal? How do we make the deal happen? You know? It's just annoying. It's just annoying to find out how often these people say one thing out of one side of their mouth and do another. And then I'm annoyed at myself for being annoyed. It's like, cheer. Are you so slow to learn? Of course that's what these people are doing. None of these people are genuine. None of these people are truth tellers. But anyway, the whole reason that they went over to this guy's house, where they were going to have a little shindig and sit around the TV and watch the latest episodes of The Crown. This is wild. This is crazy. Can you imagine being this Tom Barrack and being like, hey, you guys want to come over to my 1,200-acre ranch and we can like pop some popcorn and watch The Crown? You into that, Prince Harry? And Harry's over there like, yeah, sounds great. He can't wait to go and malign his family to somebody else. Apparently, as they were sitting there watching episode after episode, Harry's over there crunching his popcorn being like, yeah, well, it's actually way worse than that. It's way worse than that. You know, this is inaccurate, but only to the extent that it's not as bad as it. This is not portraying how bad it actually is. It's actually 1,000 times worse. You know, and it's like over and over and over again, like anytime he could point out the inaccuracies of it, to the extent that it wasn't portraying the devastation to each individual properly, he was over there. He had this to say. He had that to say. And the last episodes were about his personal family, like his mother and his father. If I'm remembering this timeline correctly, at the time when they were watching this, yeah, it was his own family. Wild, wild stuff to be introduced to somebody and then at their 1,200-acre estate and y'all are sitting around watching a dramatization about your mom and dad at the first introduction when you meet this person. Can you imagine going over to somebody's house, you've never met them before, and then y'all are going to watch a show that depicts the complete and total destruction of your parents' marriage, their many affairs, their fights, the many egregious ways in which they both conducted themselves, and this is your introduction to this person? This is a crazy world that these people live in. And no wonder Harry is discombobulated. These are not normal circumstances that our minds, our hearts, our emotions could properly function through all of this crazy and come out 100% stellar on the other side. This is wild to sit down and watch a show about your family with a billionaire. You're trying to grease a deal with this person. But first, let's all ingest a whole bunch of drama from my family. And then we can like talk about how you and I can maybe have a deal. I mean, that's weird. Now, it's not lost on you or I that this is a strange meeting of the minds. But it's even more strange because while Harry and Meghan are cozying up to Tom Barrack, he was just about to be incriminated on serious criminal charges. So not only are they kicking aside every one of their political sensibilities to become friends with this guy, not only is it a weird setting that this guy would invite them over and then be like, hey, Harry, let's watch about your dysfunctional family in this Netflix series. But this guy's about to be indicted in a criminal prosecution. Why are Harry and Meghan associating with this person? I don't understand it. Do you understand it? It doesn't matter to them. I just need a little bit of that pie. I just need a little bit of that $1 billion. Harry sitting there, maligning his family, enjoying ripping apart every scene to give more details about how it really was to these strangers. He doesn't know this guy from Adam. He's just sitting there being ugly, being rude, being mean, throwing out this red meat to somebody who has no business knowing any of that. Harry's just sitting there doing all this because what he's learned is to be vulnerable is the highest currency in Hollywood. And by vulnerable, I mean overshare and tell people things that they have no business knowing. But that's the part that he plays in this whole scheme. That's the part he's been assigned. Okay, Harry, in order to keep us relevant, you're going to have to keep dishing on your family. You're going to have to keep explaining and re-explaining how terrible your people are. And we don't need you for anything else. When we're not using you, you can go outside and juggle with your little balls. But when we need you, be ready to complain, malign, overshare, completely and totally rip apart the privacy of your family. Just be ready to do that at any moment. So he came ready. He knew the script. They're sitting there watching. He's over there. It's much worse than that. Living among Hollywood celebrities had undermined Harry's understanding of discretion and loyalty to his family. His remarks reflected the Sussexes' mission. First, to extract revenge against the royal family, and second, to fashion their brand. To stay in the spotlight and earn millions of dollars, the Sussexes sought maximum publicity. The normal understanding of privacy was disregarded. Right, because as we've said many a time, their version of privacy means I can tell the most intimate details of my life, including Meghan's bathroom habits while she was in Africa. But you better not decide to talk about me. I can talk about me all I want. I could talk about my miscarriage at New York Times. We can expose all of Harry's mental illness. But it's when we say. And if I tell you all about my terrible, horrible mental illness and my miscarriage and all of this, you're not allowed to write any commenting pieces on that. Yes, I know I offered these stories up into the public conversation, but you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to comment back about it. You're not allowed to add to the conversation. This is a one-way conversation here. I tell you, you accept and shut up. Soon after their visit to the barracks, Harry was driven around Los Angeles on an open-air bus with James Corden and a camera crew. The British star of the play One Man, Two Governors was filmed serving tea and biscuits to the prince, who in turn sucked up to the comedian's pranks and flattery. The interview Corden's producer would reveal was the result of Harry pestering the star to appear on his show. Now, you remember James Corden was invited to their wedding against all odds. Why was that guy invited? And why Harry would want so desperately to, knit his rising star to that of James Corden, I'll never know. That little goon is just, I don't even understand how he got so famous. He's not that funny. Is he even funny at all? I don't know. Every time I see him, he's just kind of acting goofy and, just this roly-poly little funny weirdo. And it's probably right on Harry's level of humor. That's probably why he so desperately wanted to hang out with James Corden. But that whole little interview was so awkward. I remember seeing little clips and snippets of it at the time and just being like, wait, why are you doing this, Harry? This is weird. This is odd. And the conversation wasn't really all that interesting. So they had to make up for the lapse in decent conversation with a bunch of tomfoolery and a bunch of filler bits. Anyway, in the course of their conversation, they are talking about The Crown. And Harry, not but 2 nights before, had been over there watching it and dissecting it for a bunch of strangers. And Harry says that he thought that the Netflix show was fantastic, that there wasn't any problems with this show. Despite The Crown being branded as a hatchet job on his parents, Harry told Corden with self-pity, "I'm way more comfortable with The Crown than I am seeing the stories written about my family, or my wife, or myself." He added,
Of course, it's not strictly accurate, but loosely, it gives you a rough idea about that lifestyle, the pressures of putting duty and service above family and everything else, and what can come from that.
Okay, Harry. Makes perfect sense why you'd be praising The Crown up and down. Because you're working for Netflix. And that's what everybody said. They're like, oh, this is so interesting. Because Harry is constantly talking about how the media and TV and all of this won't give him or his family or his people a break. Yet when you have a show that's blatantly taking the names of his family, the incidents loosely that have happened to them, and then like profiting off of it enormously, yet he has no problem with that. Could it be because you're employed by the same people who are maligning your family in the series? Look, as somebody who loves The Crown, may it never go off the air. But still, for Harry, this is just another hypocritical statement. Oh, we're only 2 pages into this chapter, and it's been hypocrisy right, left, and center. I don't know why I'm surprised. I don't even hardly know why I'm commenting on it. Do I expect a different kind of personality trait to appear here? Of course not. Harry was untroubled that the Corden interview was broadcast on February 2021 at the same night as Prince Philip was in the hospital for his 13th day. Same day, the Queen's coming out begging people to please be vaccinated against COVID, which was the line everybody was using at the time. That was, safety first. And for Harry to have gone out and done this little hokey pokey stupidity with James Corden, tackling his vulnerability, once again tackling how the media has always maligned him, once again dealing with all of his same things. He's only got like 2 songs he can sing. Here his family, his grandparents, beloved grandparents, are suffering. His grandmother's trying to carry the weight on her 94-year-old shoulders. Grandfather's in the hospital for days. I mean, he's coming up on 2 solid weeks in the hospital. But Harry wants to go over there and eat tea and biscuits with James Corden on the top of a bus. In his bid for publicity, Harry appeared to ignore his grandparents' grief. Breaking custom, he also disclosed that the Queen gave Archie a waffle maker for Christmas. Then suddenly, Harry decides that the only way to keep the eyes on him is to just humiliate himself. That's the only way here. So he announces that, I actually am dying for a pee. Harry was filmed telling the owners of a Bel Air house that he needed to use their bathroom and could he please come in. And they said that he could come in and use their bathroom. This is the content that James Corden has for us? This is the content that Harry was agreeing to?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's have me acting like a toddler that can't hold it and knocking on random doors in Bel Air begging to use the restroom and just whiz all over the place.
Self-humiliation had become an occasional essential ingredient in the Sussexes' search for publicity. Even Archwell's first podcast for Spotify relied on coaxing 19-month-old Archie to appear.
You can speak into it,
Harry urged his son, pointing at the microphone.
Archie, is it fun?
Asked Meghan a mite desperately.
Fun,
Archie replied.
After me. Ready?
Harry commanded his son.
Say, Happy New Year!
Prompting nervous laughter from the couple.
Yes, Archie's so cute, right?
The year of their Spotify podcast featured 13 guests, invited by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, to speak about the power of connection. Okay, am I mixing this up here? Is this the same podcast that Meghan had? The Archetypes podcast? Was Harry was initially supposed to be part of that? Because, I don't think we ever saw him. Maybe in that first initial episode when they're using their child once again to draw in the listeners. But after that, did we ever see that guy? The radio station was billed for people to, quote, share their vulnerabilities within that safe space. Among the helpless was Elton John. He chose to confess that he was an alcoholic. And he wouldn't have survived COVID if it hadn't been for Zoom so that he could, make his AA meetings. Okay. But this whole statement here, let's come onto our podcast so you can share your vulnerabilities within a safe space. What are you talking about? How is it a safe space when you're inviting the entire world in to listen at their discretion, whenever? That's not a safe space. That's the very antithesis of a safe space. They don't care. Whatever they need to tell people to get them their butts in the seats. More confessions flowed. To capture public attention, the Sussexes relied on self-exposure, including themselves. Meghan's pregnancy featured as a celebration of her importance. So once she's told everybody she's pregnant, she's going to need to come out with some pregnancy announcement photos. Because you can't have a baby unless you've had your pregnancy photos. So Mason Harriman, a Nigerian-born photographer, educated at Bradfield, a minor English public school, and known for his support of the Black Lives Matter movement, was hired for the shoot. The result was spectacular. Harriman's black and white portrait showed Meghan lying on the ground under a willow tree with her head on Harry's lap. Her right arm was resting on their baby bump. Guaranteed to appear on front pages across the world, Harriman shot the photo of the free spirits with an iPad from London. I don't understand that misplaced modifier in this sentence. Was the iPad from London, or was he taking pictures of them from London with an iPad? I'm sorry, I don't understand that sentence. Regardless, I'm not going to belabor the point. He had a lot to say about that picture, specifically the tree of life behind them. Listen to this, y'all. With the tree of life behind them, he wrote, and the garden representing fertility, life, and moving forward, they didn't need any direction because they are and always have been waltzing through life together as absolute soulmates. The tree of life behind them, It's the Garden of Eden, is it? There's a snake in that garden, too. Anyway, it's an interesting note that this willow tree that represents so much behind them, this tree of life, this one that they decided to take their picture in front of, that tree was photoshopped in later by Harriman while he was in London. So, all of this over-romanticizing of the picture and the willow tree and the tree of life and the fertility and all this, a fabrication, just like everything else. It's such a microcosm of the extent of who they really are as people. Let's put this thing forward. Let's put this picture forward. Act like it's just this sort of seamless thing that fell haphazardly together in this most spectacular way. We just stumbled out into the garden, waltzed our soulmate selves in. We fell to the ground, my head in Harry's lap, willow tree behind. He snapped a couple of pictures on his iPad, and voila, Here we are, barefoot, pregnant in the garden, just living the life of Adam and Eve had they not eaten a bite of that apple. But, of course, it was never that simple. They probably needed an enormous direction, and then he ended up having to Photoshop the picture and put a tree in the background and sort of, fix it up once he got back to London. It's just so typical. All right, well, anyway. Soon after the shoot, Harriman was appointed the chairman of London's South Bank Centre, one of the city's largest arts and music complexes, of course. I wonder if he still has that job, because it seems like so many people who climbed up the ladder on Harry and Meghan's backs are sliding down rapidly. The rest of the world was beginning to be filled with critics. Okay, not everybody was over there clasping their hands to their chest in ecstasy. Publicity-shy woman tells 7.67 billion people, "I'm pregnant," was the Daily Star's headline over the photograph. The newspaper echoed Piers Morgan's quip. They quit the country for privacy, and they've hardly shut up since. It's all complete hogwash. Meghan supporters agreed with her own definition of privacy. I think everyone has a basic right to privacy. We're not talking about anything that anybody else wouldn't expect. It's about boundaries, respect. Meghan represented a powerful strand of opinion among influencers. So we've got, some real mixed reactions to this photograph. Look, if you want to announce your pregnancy, by all means, no one's saying you can't. But it's this demand that everybody praise you for being pregnant. Like there's not like billions of women who aren't pregnant right now. She acts like she and Harry have invented the idea of pregnancy. The way she cradles her baby bumps, the way she's constantly flicking her coat open, the way she wants to highlight it every time, like, look what I just did. Have you ever heard tell? It's like, yeah, well, whatever. The Sussexes' publicity offensive flummoxed the Queen's private secretary, Edward Young, and his staff. Oh, Young. I just wish that I know that the British way is different than the American way, I'm not an idiot. But I do sometimes wish that the palace would just deal with Meghan the way she needs to. I just wish they would bullwhip her out of town. Really and truly come guns blazing, all right? And I know, you can't, it's not your way, I get it. But Meghan only respects strength. If she sniffs out weakness in any way, she's going to exploit it. That's what a bully does. And she keeps making bets that the palace won't come after her with all their knowledge. And she keeps winning those bets because they won't. They don't say anything. I know, never explain, never complain. And I would say 99.9% of the time, great strategy. But with Meghan, it's like, all right already, you guys. Now, I say that as we are currently watching the Sussex brand melt down like the witch after Dorothy poured a bucket of water on her. So maybe the palace and their long suffering is paying off. I mean, it could be. But Young he didn't know what to do with the Meghan situation. And he completely and totally undermined the power of the cultural moment that seized Meghan's victimhood and used it for their own agenda. Perhaps he would have been right in a different time. Maybe he could have underplayed everything that Meghan was doing and said, oh, it'll all blow over. This is just today's news, but nobody can care about tomorrow. It went on for years longer than it had to. Young just wasn't farsighted enough to see what people wanted in that moment. And they wanted Meghan's victimhood. They wanted to use Meghan's story to continually beat the drum about racial issues and victimization and how white people in power are always going to be a problem. So Young faced a popular couple promoting themselves at the palace's expense. 1 year after Sandringham, the Sussexes had sealed their breakaway. They'd been given 1 year to make a real decision about what they wanted to do, and it was clear that, the year's up and they aren't coming home. Officials suspected that an interview with Oprah Winfrey was in the offing. Never before in the modern era had the monarchy been challenged in quite this way. Instead of summoning expert strategists to plan a counterattack and undermine the Californians, Young panicked. The conundrum Young faced was complicated. Meghan's case against the Mail on Sunday was progressing through the court, and the palace staff who complained about Meghan's alleged bullying were dissatisfied that their grievances had been buried. For her part, during 2020, Meghan had good reason to believe that Jason Kanoff's memorandum describing the allegations of her bullying had been forgotten. Similarly, she assumed Kanoff would not expose the inaccuracy of her own high court statement about the letter to her father and her denial of any assistance to the authors of Finding Freedom. Timid palace officials would resist open warfare. Her gamble appeared to pay off. Nothing had really been done about her bullying before. Remember, Kanoff had written the memorandum, didn't come to anything. It had gone up to William's private secretary, didn't come to anything. So all the people who had been really taken down by Meghan's aggressive behavior, both passive and outright aggressive, people who had been belittled by her, who had been reduced to tears, people who were left shaking and scared all the time, people who were not coming into work because they were so scared to deal with her outrageous behavior and her temper tantrums. All of those people were left to sort of just pick up the pieces because those silly memorandums that had been written, Meghan was protected all the time by the palace, regardless of what Meghan wants to say. The palace was not taking care of their own against Meghan. Meghan wants to say she was the one being bullied. No, the people who were being bullied were the ones who couldn't get their voices out there because whatever Meghan did, there was going to be a cover-up for. Let's not embarrass Harry's wife. So she was right not to be afraid because she knew they weren't going to come out. And even if they did, they wouldn't come out and tell everything. But she's not even concerned that they'll come out at all. By the way, speaking of that court case of hers, in the last episode, because I don't read ahead in this book, I read the next chapter and then I tell you about it. I had no idea what went on in the court case. I assumed that things had gone fairly well. It all was looking like she was not going to win that battle. But apparently, she did. And the judge just did a 180, and everything that he had said leading up to it, he's just going to completely flip. He had said that Meghan's lawyers and the statements that Meghan had made were inaccurate, that they were shallow, that there was no foundation to any of the things she's saying, that it was all hyperbolic, and it was, she had to pay all these lawyer fees and everything. But, the final verdict, suddenly he's reversing course on everything. I can only surmise that it was because he was making a judgment in a time when to condemn somebody of mixed race would have made people rally against him and say that he was just another white person who wanted to have a boot on the neck of somebody who was biracial. Tom Bauer says that part of the problem with that court case was that the palace weren't as helpful to the mail on Sunday as they could have been. That would have really enhanced their argument. David Engel, Jason Kanoff's solicitor, had not been overly helpful to the mail on Sunday. He explained that the palace knew how the letter was created, but gave no hint about their evidence. The newspaper's editor was disappointed. Much more surprising was Judge Warby's conclusion. Skeptical that the newspaper could produce evidence contradicting Meghan, Warby decided that there was no need for a trial. Meghan would be handed victory without submitting to cross-examination. And how exactly did he think that there wasn't evidence against Meghan's statements? The judge refused to hear the evidence of the 4 palace employees. He decided that most of the evidence submitted by the newspaper in defense, including Meghan's text messages, were irrelevant. How? You haven't heard the evidence of the people who are actually there. You read the text messages in which she is going back and forth with Kanoff and saying, let's use this language so that when it's leaked, people will be sorry for me. How is that irrelevant? The newspaper, he said, had refused to, quote, see the light. Their defense, he declared, had been reduced to speculative hypothesis founded on hearsay from an unknown source which lacks corroboration and is contradicted by both key individuals. Dramatically, Warby gave a summary judgment in Meghan's favor. The newspaper, he ruled, had breached her copyright in privacy. How did it breach her copyright in privacy when in Obed Scobie's book, the letter was again quoted? But she never had a problem with that copyright in privacy. It's the same thing, except one of those publications is in favor of her and one isn't. If that's the case, then Obed Scobie should have been in trouble as well. How can the judge have such tunnel vision on this? How is this even possible? In his judgment, Warby damned the newspaper's publication of the excerpts of the letter as manifestly excessive and therefore unlawful. Being royal did not make one public property. Her letter, ruled Warby, was from a distressed daughter and private. There was no public interest in Meghan's relationship with her father being exposed, nor did Thomas Markle have a right to challenge People magazine's defamation of him. I'm sorry, what? You don't have a right to come out and deal with the defamation that has been laid out in the streets? Her relationship with the authors of Finding Freedom was equally irrelevant. Meghan's credibility and reputation was protected from any challenge by the judge. Meghan and Schillings had won an outright victory. I guarantee you she wouldn't have won that same victory had times been different. If she were to take this court case now, it would have been tried completely differently. But it shouldn't have been. Either way, it shouldn't have been. Let's look at the merit, not at what the public conversation is. This judge was scared to give a ruling against Meghan Markle. That is all there is to it. And his reasonings are pathetic. And I want to know how he could exclude the situation with the book Finding Freedom. Doesn't that provide foundation? Doesn't that show that she has a pattern of behavior where she leaks information and then tries to do a cover-up? The fact that she's not mad about that letter being quoted in Obed Scobie's book is incredibly important to this judge. How he could say that was irrelevant information is beyond me. The only thing that I agree with him on, and this is something I kind of thought about for a while but I haven't said yet, was the fact that I have wondered how it is a matter of public interest and relevance that Meghan wrote a letter to her dad. Like the fact that the newspaper said, well, we get to print this because the public wants to know about it. Well, the public wants to know about a lot of things. It might not be your business to know what's going on between two people. Just because Meghan is a public figure doesn't mean that we then get to read her mail. So that never was a real strong point to me from the newspaper. And I agree with the judge on those grounds that letter wasn't something for everybody to read. But if Meghan had never allowed her friends to speak to people and hadn't given that letter then to Obed Scobie and said, here, you can use this, she would have had a case. But because she did those other two things, that does mean that she was okay with public scrutiny of private correspondence. So that makes what the judge says unimportant. The judge says nobody should have had any access to it and nobody needs to look at this letter and it's not your business. All right, you're right, it isn't. But Meghan made it our business when she went to all sorts of positive outlets and said, hey, could you tell my side of the story using this letter? She's introduced it to the public conversation. Anyway, what a disappointment that judge turned out to be. The newspaper and the media industry were baffled by Warby's decision. To deny a trial offended the meaning of justice. No one could explain the judge's about turn. Representing the shock across the media, Camilla Long described Warby's judgment as, quote, a dream decision for the powerful wishing to escape scrutiny. The public, who allowed Harry and Meghan to use a British brand to make money, were denied the truth by a judge. Unsurprisingly, Meghan disagreed. She came out and said, we've all won a victory today. You cannot take somebody's privacy and exploit it. I share the victory with each of you because we all deserve justice and the truth, and we all deserve better. Her treatment by the media, she said, was illegal and dehumanizing. The public, she insisted, was entitled to reliable, fact-checking, high-quality news, which is why she went on to Oprah and decided to tell all sorts of things about the royal family. True, untrue, colors of the truth. However the father of lies decided to lead her. The thing is that Meghan says you cannot take somebody's privacy and exploit it. That is the thing that is keeping her going. She's taking the royal family's privacy and exploiting it. Does she not expect to be called on this? God. Buoyed by her victory against the Mail on Sunday, Meghan sat in a Santa Barbara garden ready for an interview with Oprah Winfrey, which had been planned prior to the wedding. She had been planning and plotting and scheming like a snake to get into that seat across from Oprah lo these many years. Meghan was now ready to shame her in-laws and assert her narrative against the Cambridges. This is just so petty to me. Can you even believe it? I mean, this would be trashy on every conceivable level. Like going and talking to a bunch of strangers about your in-laws and your annoying brother and sister. Nobody gives a rat's ass about your fight with your brother-in-law. Like, literally no one cares. And yeah, these people are famous and all that, but it's like, you're not ever telling anything that makes it seem like you're being honest about any of this, because you are always the hero of your narrative. That makes it disingenuous. Now, if you really wanted to lie effectively, what you need to do is sprinkle in a few times when you were sort of in the wrong, and that makes people want to trust you. But when you were always telling us how you were the victim, you did everything right, you were perfect, it makes people go, well, what are you covering for? But if you could say a few times when you're like, no, I just feel like I got really frustrated and I spoke incorrectly to this person, and I was so passionate and upset that I totally came off wrong. If she'd thrown in a couple of those, people would have been like, oh, she's really honest, And she could have been telling lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. But if she can throw in just a few things that would make her seem like she's being fair, oh, she would probably still have us eating out of her hand. To some, this was a reject's revenge against the royal family who plotted to deny her destiny. Those who smeared her reputation in London with lies about the pre-wedding arguments and her bullying were in her sights. Life is about telling stories, right? Said Meghan. Telling stories through a truthful lens. There's that lens again. Through a truthful lens? What are you even talking about? Isn't there only just one way to tell a story? There's no lens you have to attach. If you're going to open your mouth to say something, it should be truthful. This is just such... Meghan, just stop talking. If you don't have anything to say, just don't talk. Over the previous weeks, Meghan's lines had been written, rewritten, and rehearsed. She knew precisely the moments that she would hesitate, draw in breath, touch a carefully poised strand of hair, betray her reluctance to deliver a withering condemnation of the royal family. Oh, I don't know if I should. And overcoming her hesitancy and bashfully reciting her obligation to tell the truth. I don't know. But okay, for the sake of transparency, I will. It's hard to talk about it because I'm so shy about really exposing anybody. Kindness and compassion are just my core virtues. So this whole interview kind of goes against, how I would normally operate, but I know I have to overcome that for the sake of truth. I have to sacrifice the way I would normally function in service of truth. And sometimes truth means I have to do the hard thing and expose some of the damaging toxicity that does exist in the royal family. The interview lasted 3 hours and 20 minutes. Harry would be included after about 2 hours. You know, let's drag him in, you know, at the end of this. What in the world? These two girls gabbing about him. I mean, he is the crux of the matter. She wouldn't even be here if it hadn't been for Harry. He should have been included like right up front and center at the beginning. It just shows what a pawn he is in all of this. During the shoot, Meghan disclosed that she was expecting a girl. She made no reference to Prince Philip nearing the end of his life. The thing is that because she's not kind and compassionate by nature, in reality, she owns none of those virtues. It wouldn't have even occurred to her that in order to seem exceptionally genuine, she needed to say something about Prince Philip's physical health and declining well-being. If she were at all kind and compassionate, that would have been at the forefront of her mind to say, we're wishing them well. We are so concerned for him, you know, but if she had any of that in the first place, they wouldn't have left. But I'm continually astounded by some of these very obvious things she could have done to further manipulate the people watching. That's why I say she's not good at this. She's only sophisticated up to a certain point, but beyond that, she has no idea how to properly get people on her side for an extended amount of time. She only knows how to say the right things that are going to get people in her good graces for today. But she's not thinking about tomorrow. Fiddly dee. I'll think about that tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, because you didn't think about it, tomorrow ain't coming for you the way you want it to. Oprah had a great time. Regardless of what to me seems like a massive failure, Oprah came out and said that it was the best interview she'd ever done. Did any of y'all watch that and go, well done, Oprah. You asked all the questions we wanted. You know, none of us were sitting there going, oh, this is somebody who is unbiased and going to give us the true tale of what had gone on. Oprah's over there gasping, bulging eyes, can't believe what she's hearing. She's playing right into it. What a sycophant she looked like. It just disgusted anybody who watched that interview and thought that they were, were hopeful of hearing the real story, getting some hard-hitting journalism. She failed us. This was the best interview she'd ever done. It's time for her to pack up her toys and go home. Because if this is the best she could do, then she has petered out as an interviewer. There was a shock in Buckingham Palace. The Sussexes' failure to tell the palace in advance was deemed to be an insult. Of course they're underhanded. And of course it's an insult. But it was an insult born of cowardice. Officials feared the worst. Edward Young could now understand Harry's recent haste to persuade the Queen that the couple could do commercial deals, yet remain working, impartial royals. Trust in Harry rapidly declined. So many people who really believed that Harry was just a unwilling participant in all of this, like he just kind of got swept out in the tide, but his heart was still loyal to the family, still loyal to the royals. But this really shattered anybody's idea that he wasn't 100% participating in all of this. Now, like I said last time, I think that Harry there is a percentage of him that is an unwilling participant in this. I think he had no idea that it was going to get like this. I think that he did want to hurt his family a little bit. Like any spoiled, rotten child wants to inflict pain because they don't know what else to do with themselves. And it seems like it might be kind of fun for a little bit. It's like a game. That's how I think Harry viewed going with Meghan and, Meghan's desire to shake things up. I think he was attracted to that. Because he's not a very strong personality. So he wanted to link himself with one who was stronger than him. He liked the idea. It thrilled him to think about what could happen. But it's all gotten out of control. I don't think he's still happy with where things have landed. And you can see it on his face over and over and over again. Whenever he's with Meghan, there's a strain on his face like of embarrassment. I think that for a long time he thought that it might be hard now. I might be a little bit embarrassed now. It's just different. It's just a different lifestyle. but I am speaking my truth. And the reason I'm uncomfortable, that's shame other people are putting on me, but I don't need to feel ashamed of what I'm doing. This is all okay. It's just, I have to get used to this new normal. I have to get used to standing up for myself in this way. But it's not that I'm actually doing anything wrong. This is just other people's issue, but it's not mine. So I think there's a little bit in there where he's gotten swept up into something he doesn't want. But at any point, he's an adult male. He could assert his masculinity and say, I'm out of here. This is not for me. I am not doing this anymore. I made a colossal mistake. I'm going home. All right, these are the divorce papers. I'm seeing a lawyer. I'm done with this. And call her bluff, because she doesn't think he's ever going to walk out the door. She's used and abused him all of these years because she doesn't think he has the strength to do it. She's probably right. I would love to see a version of this story where Harry rises up, finds some inner strength, that we never knew he had. And then it's just like, peace out, lady. Okay, I'm over this. Figure it out on your own. I'd love to see that story. I pray to see that story. But I just think that Harry is too far deep. He lacks the backbone. He'll never be able to get out now on his own. I mean, unless he decides to employ some help getting out of this, I don't see how he's ever going to get out of it on his own. But I do think that Harry wants to get out. I just don't think he knows how. And I think he's given in to all of his baser instincts. So that what once may have been an oopsie, I think I've gotten myself into something, now that he's there, he's just given over to it. So I think that there was a window of time when people could legitimately feel sorry for him. That window of time has closed. He's in it now. He has now decided that this is going to be his thing. He's going to go against his family. He's going to make a big deal about them. He's going to make them this terrible gang that's been after him his whole life. And that, so at this point, when the Oprah interview came out, the window had closed. This is who he really was now. So all those people still hoping that, I think he made a mistake. He's really kind-hearted. Remember, he likes little kids. All the people who still thought that suddenly realized we've lost him. He's not coming back. He's in it now. He's embracing this now. And we may never see the Harry that we once loved. Young recommended retaliation. The Queen decided that the Sussexes should resign the remaining royal patronages. Harry's last military titles and his patronage of the Rugby Football Union and Commonwealth Trust were stripped. Since he was born a prince, he kept his title. Meghan lost her patronage at the National Theatre and the Association of Commonwealth Universities, yet she could also keep her royal title. All that remained was to negotiate an agreement statement. Fraught and unsuccessful, the palace unilaterally announced, in stepping away from the work of the royal family, it is not possible to continue with the responsibilities and duties that come with a life of public service. But of course, the Sussexes shot right back. They weren't going to be told that they were incapable of living a life of service, and they said, we can all live a life of service. Service is universal. The Sussexes' response, drafted by Meghan's advisors, appeared just as 99-year-old Prince Philip re-entered the hospital. What in the world is this? You needed an advisor to draft the statement, we can all live a life of service. Service is universal. That took a staff to write that? Oh. Amid the turbulent emotions, not least Prince Philip's inevitably imminent death, there was danger about the Sussexes' behavior. Someone decided to launch a preemptive retaliation. The popular suspect, without any evidence, was Prince William. Some would say the information was delivered to the editor of The Times, while Valentine Lowe, the newspaper's royal expert, described his report as the product of several weeks of hard work. Either way, the result was striking. All right, so this is what happened. Just as Meghan's interview with Oprah was about to come out, the memorandum was taken to the Times. The memorandum that Jason Knopf had written about all of the staff that were in peril because of Meghan's behavior, traumatized by the things that she was doing and saying and the way she was behaving and treating them. So the Times revealed that Jason Knopf had reported allegations of Meghan's bullying to a senior official at Kensington Palace on March 3rd. This is when this came out. The newspaper's unnamed source also claimed that Meghan's behavior had compelled 2 personal assistants to resign and a third, suffering a loss of self-confidence, to say, I can't stop shaking. None of the 4 involved were identified. all claimed that they had been operating in a climate of fear where employees were routinely humiliated by both Meghan and Harry in front of their peers and repeatedly subjected to unreasonable demands. One aide told The Times it felt more like emotional cruelty and manipulation, which I guess could also be called bullying. Valentine Lowe wrote that he had been approached by sources who felt that only a partial version had emerged of Meghan's 2 years as a working member of the royal family, and they wished to tell their side. Traumatized and broken by the Sussexes' behavior, the officials objected to the palace's mismanagement of their complaints. To protect Meghan, the palace had refused to investigate the allegations. All the men in gray suits who she hates have a lot to answer for because they did nothing to protect people. These are some pretty damning allegations coming out, you know? And not just towards Meghan, but towards everybody involved who protected Meghan. This coming out right before that interview also made people realize that Harry might not be the poor victim of Meghan's manipulation that some people had initially wanted to believe. Because the report said that it wasn't just Meghan bullying the staff. It was Harry as well. Not at her behest, but of his own volition. Encouraging this kind of behavior, sticking up for Meghan when she acted like this, he was fine with it. So this also sort of tore down the veil that poor little Harry, walking behind his mother's carriage, just got befuddled and confused. Those concerned, reported Rebecca English later in the Daily Mail, are fed up with the sheer hypocrisy of it all. The suggestion that they, the Sussexes, were being bullied and forced out when others were experiencing that very treatment at their hands was obnoxious and abhorrent. Meghan's lawyers had 1 week's advance notice of the Times allegations. Buckingham Palace was asked for evidence, documents, texts, and emails of her bullying. In the end, the Sussexes' representatives could produce no legal grounds to prevent publication. Meghan's response had been prepared. "Let's just call this what it is," said Meghan. "A calculated smear campaign based on misleading and harmful information." Well, misleading and harmful misinformation, you say, Meghan. Is that so? Is that why you didn't bother to sue the Times? When it came to the Mail on Sunday, you couldn't wait to get your lawyers rallied around that cause. That shoddy little case that should never have come to court at all because it was just so ridiculous. But you got lucky on that one. This paper, The Times, having just seen all the litigation that went down surrounding the Mail on Sunday, the fact that they would be willing to print a story about your bullying means the story must be true because they know who you are, how you deal, and the fact that you can win cases in court that you should never have won in the first place. Yet they seem to have such hard evidence behind this article that they aren't afraid of you or your lawyers. So that's all I need to know. That this article should come out right after she won that court case. It would appear that papers would be afraid to write about Meghan in any negative way after that. But the evidence must have been so airtight that they felt no fear. Her lawyers lamented that the newspaper was used by Buckingham Palace to peddle a wholly false narrative. They said, "We're disappointed to see this defamatory portrayal of the Duchess of Sussex given credibility by a media outlet." The Duchess, the lawyers added, was saddened by this latest attack on her character, particularly as someone who has been a target of bullying herself and is deeply committed to supporting those who have experienced pain and trauma. Did you hear what I heard? I didn't hear an outright denial of the facts. It's all, "I'm disappointed to hear that you would say that." But that is not, I didn't do that. What are you talking about? I've never in my life acted like that. You know, it's all like, it's really disappointing that you'd come to these conclusions and that you would say these things about my character. I'm really disappointed to hear that. That's not a denial. That is not a denial. And her lawyers very carefully crafted that statement so that it wouldn't be. The Sussexes interpreted the newspaper report as yet another malicious attack by the palace on themselves, the innocent victims. Harry and Meghan had no doubt that the leak was instigated by William to sabotage their big moment, a preemptive strike before their big interview. Since Jason Knopf had written the memorandum, either he or his superiors had leaked it to the Times. The Sussexes knew that the palace could not be given the right of reply or even invited to comment about their harmful allegations against the royal family to Oprah Winfrey. But that, in their opinion, was different. They were speaking the truth, and Knopf's memo was utterly false. The real problem, this is their real anger in all of this, is that the Oprah interview was filmed in February. All this stuff came out in March. So they don't have a chance to rebut this bit to Oprah. It's already done. It's filmed. What they said is what they said. They wouldn't be mad about the fact that the palace came out and said any of this about them, because this just furthers their narrative. Now they get to say, look, they're coming after us. See? But the real problem is that they didn't get to use this in the Oprah interview. That's why they're so mad. Whatever the motive, the character assassination of the Sussexes misfired. This is disappointing, but true. Nobody really grabbed a hold of those bullying rumors like we should have. We should have taken those rumors by both hands and sat them down and said, tell me everything you know. Delivered without sufficient evidence, many readers sensed the newspaper's source lacked conviction. The palace's caution suggested that Edward Young was fretting about whether the palace could accuse Meghan of bullying because they've got Prince Andrew that they're protecting. Belatedly, the palace hired a new firm of solicitors to investigate the bullying allegations, but hinted that only after an exhaustive process might the lawyers ask the Sussexes to answer the allegations. Sensing that weakness, which is blood in the water for Meghan, her communication staff orchestrated a wave of sympathetic statements by her friends against the palace. Ugh, we got to trot out all our friends to say all the things about us that are so nice and glowing. You guys, when have you ever in your entire life had somebody say something that was vaguely unkind, that you then decided to trot out 5, 6, or 7 of your friends on Facebook and be like, can you guys write statements about how awesome I am? I need to get a new narrative out there. So if you guys can just randomly post a bunch of really nice things about me, that would be great, because somebody over there said something mean. This is not normal behavior. This is not the kind of thing that humans do. If somebody says something mean about you, you don't then usher 7 of your friends to come out and say kind things about you. I'm really going to skim over this. Who cares what her friend said? Of course, somebody from her days at the Suits, John Cowan, a script writer, comes out and says the Duchess of Sussex is a really nice, kind, warm person. So there's this woman named Kristen Meinzer. She's like a writer and a friend or something. And she came out and had this sad little statement that she tried to pull together. And let me just say, if these are the remarks of your saviors, heaven help you. Okay, listen to what Kristen had to tell us. No one has ever had this level of racism and misogyny and vitriol leveled against them. Meisner blamed the inbred, messed up, dysfunctional family who are up against a highly educated, self-made millionaire who knew how to do the PR game. A lot of people think you guys were lucky to get her, and you blew it. You guys are stupid faces. There was a U.S. television producer, remember her friend Lindsay Roth? She came out and she told us that Meghan has kindness and goodwill running in her bones. Is that the phrase? To have something run in your bones? Interesting. Patrick J. Adams came out, flapping his gums about how the royal family had bullied her and, said that this newest chapter and its timing about Meghan's bullying is just another stunning example of the shamelessness of an institution that has outlived its relevance. Blah, 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 blah. Let me just say all the words that I've heard other people say. I don't have any thoughts of my own. He said, my friend Meghan is way out of your league, royal family. Oh, well, since Patrick J. Adams said it. Jessica Mulrooney, famous for calling Meghan's critics racist bullies, who at this moment actually was being canceled because people said that Jessica was racist. She came out swinging, saying that Meghan was just nothing but kindness, empathy, and love itself. What I think is interesting is that Jessica has been forced to come to Meghan's aid time and time again. But when Jessica was in the throes of being canceled because people said she was racist, did we ever see Meghan come out in Jessica's defense? I never saw that. Now, admittedly, how much have I actually seen? The number of times I'm like, have you guys ever heard of this? And everyone's like, yeah, we already know that. But I could not find any time when Meghan has gone out of her way to stand up for friends of hers who are in the crosshairs, because she wants everybody else to come to her defense, but she's never willing to give of herself for anybody else. What's interesting is everybody did the same thing that the lawyers had done by saying, we're so disappointed that the palace would say this. We're so disappointed that this is the color they want to paint Meghan with. We're so disappointed, blah, blah, blah. But none of them, none of her supporters came out and said the Palace 4 are lying about what Meghan did. They all just said, oh, well, the royal family's irrelevant anyway. You shouldn't listen to them. Oh, it's so disappointing that they would do this. Oh, Meghan's faced so much bullying and misogyny. But none of them said, this is an outright lie. Meghan would never do this. This is so... They all said Meghan has a loving spirit, but none of them said, this is categorically untrue. They are lying. This is falseness. Because everyone knew they couldn't say that. Tom Bauer reasserts this message by saying that none of her defenders had directly accused the Palace 4 of lying about the alleged bullying. Meghan's lawyers did not issue a claim for defamation against the Times. In Canada, the Reitman's crew recognized the truth. They all remembered that Meghan really was like this. To promote Sunday's program, CBS broadcast a clip of Meghan on Friday, March 5th. Perfectly poised, Meghan sat in a Montecito garden, a wisp of hair hanging down on her cheek, an excellent prop for her to touch while confessing her anguish and anger. For the trailer, she disclosed that she had been banned by the palace from giving Oprah an interview in 2018. But now liberated, she was able to just make a choice of your own and to be able to speak for yourself. Isn't that weird how the pronouns she uses sometimes? Like you're able to speak for yourself. You make a choice of your own. Like, but you're talking about you you personally. Like, what? I don't understand why Meghan always tries to use this kind of language that, well, I do understand why she does it. She does it because she's trying to include you and to draw you into her emotions. So she's saying you when she means me because she's trying to make us all see her side of things. But that's a really clunky way to manipulate people. Because if I don't have that experience, I'm not going to be drawn in by what you're saying. But what Meghan should have done repeatedly, and I will never stop saying this, is if she really wanted people on her side, she would have confessed just a little bit to not being perfect. Some viewers did not spot genuine sadness in her eyes. Nobody spotted genuine sadness in her eyes. Her forced look of, I'm just this little wounded bird. Stop attacking me. You know, that whole thing was so pathetic. It's like the other day when I was editing the last episode and I was looking for pictures of them when they went to go lay those wreaths down at that National Cemetery for Remembrance Day. And I was busting up laughing at the pictures I found. I had not seen those. And they are just so woebegone and just like so forcedly sad, like the graves of the fallen, the veterans. Like, they're just so fake about their sadness. All of those pictures. I mean, I've never seen any, like, the acting in those photos is so, like, 9th grade acting. And the same thing was happening in that Oprah interview. Just, like, the forced sad eyes and the biting of the lip. Well, it was just so hard. It was just so hard. Just some of the worst acting you've ever seen. At CBS headquarters in Los Angeles, there was excitement. Reduced to 85 minutes. Can you imagine what the other, I mean, there was 3 hours and 20 minutes they filmed, and it was only 85 minutes we got to see. I wonder what the rest of it was. Oprah Winfrey had hit a gold mine. ITV in London had paid about $1 million for the broadcasting rights. And like CBS, ITV was demanding premium rates for advertisements. Everybody wanted a piece of the Markle pie. On the eve of the broadcast, the Sussexes spokesperson announced that their interview would be the last word about their rift with the royal family. Having needed to have their say, they now considered the matter closed and wanted to, quote, move on. If flippin' only. This is the thing. How could they move on? Because now the palace has, done them dirty and come out with this bullying accusation. Of course, this wasn't going to be the last word they had, and, they only said that because they wanted to look like they were big and noble and we've said our piece and now we don't have to say any more. Come on, Meghan. You could have never said another word about it and gone on your merry way as soon as your feet hit the American shores. That was the whole thing. We just want to go and live our life. Well, then do it. You don't need a spokesperson to come out and be like, no, we're not going to say anything else. Okay, we've said our piece. We're not going to say anything else. Just don't say anything else. How about that idea? That sentiment was grasped by Buckingham Palace's spokesperson. On Saturday night, he predicted that the interview would be quickly forgotten sideshow, lost in the mists of time. See, this is what I'm saying. The palace had no idea what environment that they were functioning in. And this is, I'm like, do you guys have anybody like working for you guys that are kind of just like have their finger on the pulse of the cultural moment? I don't mean to say this in like a mean way whatsoever. I know they've got like young people working there. But are you guys listening to what those young people are telling you, what's going on? Because I feel like if they had gotten some people up in there to be like, hey, this isn't the days of like, you know, mainstream media and you've only got like a couple of channels on TV and like that's the source of people's information. Okay, like they need people up in there who's like, okay, this is what everyone's talking about right now. This is how we're going to respond to this by being informed by what is happening in the culture. I sometimes just feel like the palace is just like a little bit behind. Like I feel like they're still responding to things like this is 1998. It ain't, okay? You've got to be a little bit faster on the uptake here. News moves quickly. And yes, I know that usually many times stories are like, oh, it's, you know, here today, gone tomorrow. I don't really have to worry about necessarily this bad story that's come up. Everyone will forget it in the news cycle. Yeah, a lot of times they will, but not if the conversation is about something that everyone is talking about. And everyone at that time was talking about racial unrest. Meghan's coming out saying they were racist against me. Meghan's coming out saying because I was biracial, I wasn't invited into the royal family. Because I was an American and a divorcee, I was looked at then, you know, less than nothing. And because the conversation that was going on was about victimhood and Meghan's coming out feeding that narrative in a huge way, saying, yes, and I was a victim of the royal family, a narrative that people kind of already believe that the royal family picks off the weaker ones and bullies the weaker ones because people wanted to believe that's what happened with Diana. Meghan only has to come out and be like, I got more inside information about what bullies those people really are. In that climate, this story was going to be explosive. It wasn't just going to be lost in the mist of time. Come on. And that's what I'm saying. Like, was there nobody in the palace staff that was like, well, actually, I kind of think we need to consider what Meghan is saying and consider all the megaphones that are going to be screaming this story out because people want to believe that this is what's happening. People are such rageaholics right now that they want to continue to be outraged about this topic. Meghan is giving these people the drug they're asking for. So we need to come out and we need to have some kind of plan. Now everyone's going to be high on this bit of outrage. What are we going to do? How are we going to actually deal with this? And what are we going to do to kind of like be the buzzkill to this whole thing? How are we going to help people come back to their senses? But there doesn't appear to have been anybody in the palace who was saying, do you understand the cultural moment that Meghan is making these points in? Okay, well, Edward Young, again, failed to anticipate the sensational radio and TV headlines that would dominate the waking hours on Monday, 8th March. With his passive approach, Young also did not foresee the onslaught from America. Naively, Young believed that the interview would be the Sussexes' last word. Was he just introduced to Meghan and Harry? How would this ever be their last word? On Saturday night in Montecito, Meghan was in bed crying. Not because she felt any remorse for her shattering allegations against the royal family, but because the firm had orchestrated a smear about her bullying.
I held her, and she just cried and cried and cried. And here we were. I mean, all we'd done is speak the truth in the most compassionate and truthful way we knew how to do. Oh, we hadn't done anything wrong. All we did was tell the other side of the story, and of course the men in grey suits came down on my wife with a hatchet. This business about her bullying. Have you ever known Meghan to be anything but genuine, kind, sincere, and loving? She saved me from the demons of the royal family. She's my saviour. Jesus Christ himself could never have been as wonderful as she was to me. And now they want to malign her. Can you believe it?
As she cried, Meghan might have recalled telling the Fortune magazine audience 5 months earlier that if you live knowing the truth, regardless of what anyone says, you'll be able to go to sleep with a clear conscience. At the same time, she'd probably also forgotten informing the same audience of this little bit of advice. If you listen to what I actually say, it's not controversial. That night, Meghan and Harry apparently believed that their interview with Oprah Winfrey was true and not controversial. What ended up inflammatory is people's interpretation of what I say. They just choose to misunderstand what I'm saying. Nothing I have ever said is controversial. Saying that the people in the palace were racist against me and the color of my baby's skin, that's not controversial. Calling somebody a vicious misogynist, that's not controversial. That's just the truth. And if people can't live by the truth, that's their problem, not mine. In Harry and Meghan's opinion, they were victims of the racist tabloids, and now Buckingham Palace was stoking hatred about fictitious bullying. That's the end of that chapter. Friday, we'll talk about the actual interview. Can you even imagine going through life just this mixed up about everything? Can you even, like if I were Harry, I would just be like, I gotta go get a hotel room just so I can have some blessed peace from this conversation. I'd just be tired of talking about it. I'm tired of talking about it now. I've been talking about it for 6 months. But if I were Harry and they're coming up on their 5th wedding anniversary, and I've been like, for 5 years, I've been fighting against this phantom, I would just want to close up shop, dig a hole in the ground, and go into hiding. I mean, if ever there was a time when I would want to go and just run away, all this, it's like how he said that, there's just been a spotlight on me my whole life. I just want to recede into the darkness. I don't want anybody to bother me. I just want to go live my quiet life. If he thought it was bad in the royal family, can you imagine how bad he feels now? Like, there truly is constantly news about him. And it is all negative. And it is all scathing. And if I were Harry, I would just be looking for any solution to end what was happening. And not to be dark, you guys, but he's not a mentally well individual. There needs to be people who are watching him, if you get my meaning here. I truly hope that he hasn't come to that. But what is his salvation in all of this? Meghan was supposed to be his salvation. Meghan was supposed to be the one that was going to help him see the light. He believes she was the one saving him, and yet his life is so much worse now than it was. Yesterday was 4th of July. And we went to this place called the American Village here in Birmingham. And it's all like set up like colonial times, So we went, and it's so much fun. If you ever happen to be in Birmingham, 4th of July, go to the American Village. Great time. Anyway, there's this actor, and he was giving the Patrick Henry speech, "Give me liberty, give me death." And you know the line in that speech where it says, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet to be bought at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God." And I just think that, like, for Harry, I thought about Harry, when I heard that. And I thought, is life so dear and peace so sweet that this life that Meghan has made for you, that you are willing to purchase it at the price of chains and slavery? Do you not know even now that the chains are on you? That you are shackled to Meghan and shackled to this life that she promised you that you have yet to see? Your life is terrible, even if you live in a palace. And is that peace so dear that you're willing to continue to live it, shackled to this new identity that you never wanted? When are you going to cast them off and really be a true American here? You are in America. Learn some of our ways of freedom. Cast off the shackles, okay? And go back and live the life that you had, that you were once in freedom, whether you realized it or not. Yet you bought into this fake life. You bought into this tempting ideal of riches and fame and glory. And none of those things have come to you. Where is the fruition of these promised dreams? Where is any of this? None of it happened. So, to Harry, I would just say, you don't have to live like this. You can go and live in a new way. Go and be free. You don't need to. Meghan was not your ticket to ride. Okay? Wake up. Wake up from this nightmare that you found yourself in. You don't have to live forever like this. Finding freedom, you just found the shackles. Cast the shackles off. Go find real freedom. Freedom is, where you're going to find freedom, Harry? You're going to find freedom and forgiveness. You go back to your family and you tell them, I devastated our family and I don't expect forgiveness. But I would like to tell you that I was in the wrong. I don't expect the palace to help me find a place to live. I don't expect a handout from the palace. I don't expect to get any of my royal duties back. But I am here to say I was wrong. You do not have to forgive me, but I want to apologize because I have devastated this family, and for my own wanton desires, for fame, for glory, for visibility, for likes, for clicks, for money, I sold you out. I can guarantee you that they would forgive him. If he were to come and boldly proclaim what he had done as wrong, it is hard to find the person who can stand up against true and genuine apologies. The problem is we just don't see very many of those, and we don't know how to say we're sorry for things. And people aren't teaching their children how to say sorry for things because they don't ever apologize to their kids for things. Anyway, rant over. But I can't wait to get into the next chapter. We'll do that on Friday. And I am dying to get into that one. I can't wait to see how Tom Bauer deals with the Oprah interview. All right, this has been a super long episode. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. I will see you again on Friday. Bye.